I heard the birds of the forest in the distance, cawing and chirping, the fluttering of their wings echoing all around me as I startled some of them out of the trees beside me. Their black feathers blended in well with the night, only shimmering lightly by the light of the moon as it crept over the mountain tops. Despite walking through the darkness, I felt oddly comfortable compared to earlier in the day. There was something warming about the silent stillness of it all, and the glowing light of my torch guiding my way. I reached a small, familiar cobblestone pathway that jutted off to the left of the dirt trail. Across it was a sturdy brick bridge over a small flowing creek. Beyond that, I did not know. It was not the direction for me to go. I turned to my right, opposite of the stone trail, and calmly walked between the trees off the road. Though as wild and lush as the rest of the forest around, this area was greatly familiar to me. I weaved between the trees in the midst of the night, a mere shadow fluttering past their leaves. My feet crunched the twigs and rock on the ground as I swiftly moved forward, keeping my eyes perfectly straight ahead. A short ways into the wood, a shape began to emerge in the distance. A lightly colored and decently sized rectangular one. A small smirk appeared upon my face. Finally. I quickened my pace as the wind began to pick up wildly, blowing leaves and a chilling air across my path. The shape quickly came closer, the brown wooden structure being revealed in very small details with each step. My home. I was finally back. The small dark green door blended in with the dark oak wood around it, the entire building almost encapsulated by the forest itself. The trees grew very near to the small little abode, their foliage brushing up against the small roof, vines climbing all about the edge and trim. I stepped up to the door, unique in the fact that it had no lock, key, or handle upon it, appearing as nothing more than a solid green, ironclad entrance. It had a special way of being opened. I waved my hand in front of it and chanted a small phrase known only to me, in my own tongue. Quickly, the door trembled and bits of dust were shaken off as it did. It slowly creaked open to allow me access inside. As soon as I was in, the door closed itself powerfully, the loud magical lock upon it sealing once again with a strong, high-pitched ting. Still holding the torch, my dark little windowless home was filled with brightness. I stepped over to my large table where I had several candles waiting for me. Using the torch, I lit every single one, quickly stepping over to my bookshelf after. A small table with nothing on it sat next to my bookshelf. I leaned down, my bag reaching the floor as I knelt below. I reached around the wooden base of the furniture and placed my hand up against the wall, pushing lightly on it. A small piece of the wall gave way ever so slightly, causing the empty wood flooring next to me to groan. I stood with a smirk as I watched a large piece of the paneling disappear, sliding outwards to reveal a narrow set of stone steps down into the darkness. Without hesitation, I quickly aligned myself with the stairs and moved down them into the pitch black. I followed the curved path until I reached the bottom, stepping onto the moist dirt below. I could hear the echo of the door closing from above as it rang out through the stone hall. I walked calmly in the light of the torch past several tables and bookshelves, all covered with research from ages past. I stopped at a large cobblestone fire pit that sat directly in the middle of the room. The dark pit was packed with dried tinder and logs, all resting atop one another, ready to give birth to a beautiful bright light of warmth. I set my torch beneath a huddled group of small twigs, watching the deep blaze grow until it consumed every inch of dried wood inside that brick fireplace. I looked up around me, seeing the dull gray stone walls and all of my equipment now in full detail. The tables were scattered with parchment papers full of cluttered notes, scribblings, drawings, and schematics. Glassware in all sorts of shapes and sizes was strewn about over them. Shelves lined with books, literature, readings, studies, and all sorts of ingredients in odd bottles and containers adorned the walls in nearly every area. I looked over the fire pit to the other side of the room where another circle of bricks sat, filled with a dark red soil known as blood mulch. There were several plants of all types crowding the inside. They were all ingredients I'd gathered from years of journeying, a quest that had finally been completed on this very day. I moved over to the most open table and hastily hoisted my bag off my sore shoulders to set it down. I flipped the cover off and began sorting my goods out on the table. At the bottom of the bag was my prized possession of it all, the final and last ingredient, still freshly sitting inside the bottle. I smirked as I brought it out again to witness its wonder. I shuffled over to the underground garden and circled it to find a small empty spot among the rest of the flora. I popped the cork out of the bottle and dumped the small mushroom into my hand while kneeling along the brick edge. I reached up to the stem of the mushroom, pulling a small piece off of it between my fingertips. I placed the rest of it back into the jar carefully, still holding the small portion. Leaning forward, I used my hand to burrow lightly into the fertile red soil, dropping the small chunk into the hole. I shifted my hand to push all the dirt back on top and pack it down neatly. The interesting thing about blood mulch is its strange ability to copy plant life. The smallest sample of herbs, fungi, trees, or any other vegetation could blossom into an entire field in only a matter of days. The rarity of the soil was a problem, though. Only found far in the south, in the outer realm world known as Spitefire Solus. It would gather under the intensely heated winds beneath crags of molten lava rock. I was one of the very few who was able to gather enough to form even this small little garden. I still vividly could recall the charred, ashen bones around me as I hastily packed up as much of the soil as I could in that blistering heat. I sat at the edge of the brick and stared at the dank cellar wall, reimagining the frightful moment I looked up to see a wave of superheated orange fluid rushing at me. It was hot like molten iron, yet flowed smoothly like rushing water of a stream. I shook my head briskly to awake from that nightmare of the past. I'd luckily survived that encounter, barely, and it was paying off at this very moment. I looked down at the small packed piece of dirt to see a sprout quickly forming from the piece of mushroom. I let out a soft smile and stood up hurriedly, moving back over to the table with my bag and the jar. With that little task out of the way, it was time to begin my preparations for the creation.